The export of Asian entertainment media to the West has witnessed an audience desire for strong horror-based content, which is proven by the popularity of films like Japan's The Ring and Thailand's Shudder. Of course, this has extended to anime, where the earliest instances of explosive popularity of Japanese animation in the US were the result of horror anime from the 80s and 90s. This was also a time when the West dominantly considered animation to be for children only, so the moment they got their hands on animation that catered to adults also, they wanted to see the wildest things possible, be it in terms of violence, gore, action, sex, nudity, or just horror as a whole. Luckily for the audiences back in the day, horror anime often came with most, if not all, of that stuff. While several modern horror or horror-adjacent animes have attained global acclaim, such as Attack on Titan, Parasite, Tokyo Ghoul, and the like, the nostalgia evoked by the signature 80s and 90s anime aesthetic might just be a bit closer to our hearts. As a result, we dedicate this video to the 10 most popular horror anime from these two beloved decades. Before diving into the content, we'd like to make a very small request to our viewers. Please subscribe to our channel, like and comment on our videos, and press the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload new content. We'd be grateful to you, and we hope to bring you the best nerdy content in the future, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Perfect Blue. Starting off strong with the 1997 Satoshi Kon psychological thriller and horror, Perfect Blue is a film about a Japanese pop idol named Mima Kiragoe who leaves her idol group to become an actor, in the process enraging her die-hard fan, Me-Mania. A little context before we get into it: East Asian idol industries thrive on stan culture, attained by assigning personas to the idols of their respective groups that they have to uphold in the eyes of the public and the fans. Constant exposure and variety content alongside excessive fan service helps create strong fan bases, which often become quite rabid, especially in the case of fans or the opposite sex, as parasocial relationships are created and exploited. This in turn can fuel stalking of the idol by the fans or feelings of betrayal if the fans' favorite idols are revealed to be dating someone or change their style or line of work. In many cases, the fan can then become aggressive and violent towards the idol, but there's more to it than what meets the eye. In Perfect Blue, the protagonist Mima used to be a part of this idol group called Cham. However, she ends up leaving her job as an idol to become an actress. In the process, she has to shed her pristine and pure image and partake in explicit scenes in strip clubs and romantically interact with men for the sake of her role. This angers her obsessive fan, Me-Mania, who then begins to stalk her. She also finds a website called Mima's Room, which posts detailed records of her daily life and personal thoughts. When Mima confides in Rumi, her manager, about it, she advises Mima to ignore everything. Eventually, Mima begins to experience psychosis as a result of being stalked, her regret over leaving her idol group, and a particularly distressing sexual assault that she had to film, to the point that the lines between her reality and her on-screen pursuits begin to blur, which is a common theme in Satoshi Kon's works. Things are made worse by Mima constantly being visited by an apparition of her idol self, who identifies herself as the real Mima. At the same time, her manager Rumi, a former idol herself, has expressed great distress over Mima's new life experiences, particularly the assault scene. People involved in Mima's acting career begin to get murdered, and Mima becomes a prime suspect due to the evidence present in her closet. As a result, she begins to doubt her own memories as she cannot recall committing the crimes, but all roads lead back to her. Meanwhile, her obsessive fan, Me-Mania, is revealed to be the recipient of emails where the real Mima is instructing him to eliminate or kill the imposter. Me-Mania corners Mima, who he believes to be an imposter, as he cannot come to terms with his beloved idol having shed her innocent image, and in the process tries to sexually assault and kill her. However, Mima bludgeons him with a hammer and runs away. At the same time, the real Mima kills Me-Mania for failing in his task. A desolate Mima is found by Rumi, who takes her back home to nurse her back to health. In Rumi's absence, Mima discovers that her manager's bedroom is an identical copy of hers, and she's the one behind Mima's room. The murders, the false evidence, and Me-Mania's attack, which is the biggest plot twist of the film. Rumi was unhappy over Mima's retirement and posed as Mima, not just intentionally but due to her own disassociative identity, pretending to be the real Mima who was desperate to restore her image. And now, Rumi wants to kill Mima to make this restoration happen. This proves that Mima's psychosis was externally caused by Rumi's antics instead of everything being a trick of her mind. In the climax, Rumi chases Mima through the streets dressed as Mima the idol and almost gets run over by a truck as she hallucinates the headlights to be stage lights. She's ultimately saved by Mima and put in a mental institution. Over time, Mima becomes a popular actress, while an institutionalized Rumi remains under the delusion of being a pop idol herself. Berserk! Berserk is one of the most renowned manga of all time and is considered to be Kento Miura's magnum opus in writing, storytelling, and artwork. It has 2 anime adaptations, with the first being from 1997, but neither have been able to match up to the legacy of the manga. It falls under the dark fantasy category but is teeming with elements of horror, such as violence, gore, and the protagonist's quest for vengeance. The story is set in a fantasy version of medieval Europe and revolves around Guts, a highly capable mercenary warrior. He was born from the tree-hung corpse of his mother and left for dead until he was adopted by Gambino and Shisu. He was raised by mercenaries, and following the death of his adoptive mother Shisu, he was terribly abused by Gambino and raised to be a mercenary himself. He eventually became a skilled swordsman, killed Gambino in self-defense, and resorted to the life of a wandering mercenary. He remained unrivaled until meeting Griffith, the leader of the mercenary group known as the Band of the Hawk. Following Guts' loss to Griffith, the protagonist was made to join the latter's group. He quickly rose up the ranks of the Band of the Hawk as the Kingdom of Midland hired them in the war against the Tudor Empire. Over time, Guts and Griffith also became intensely close friends, and the protagonist goes on to develop feelings for his fellow mercenary Casca. At some point, Guts overhears Griffith tell the king's daughter that he doesn't consider Guts to be his friend as he lacks a dream of his own. So, once again, Guts and Griffith duel to decide Guts' fate. This time, Guts emerges as the victor against Griffith and leaves the band in pursuit of his own dream. His departure causes Griffith to spiral downwards, and he ends up losing his precious pendant known as the Crimson Behelit. The army of Midland declares the Hawks to be outlaws and launches an ambush, killing most of them. Guts is told of his actions triggering an eclipse by the Skull Knight, and he rejoins the remaining mercenaries to save Griffith. He also consummates with Casca, establishing their love and relationship. The triggering of the eclipse merges the realms when Griffith sacrifices his comrades to the God Hand in exchange for Godhood. The Hawks are killed by the Apostles, with Guts and Casca as the only survivors. Griffith, now reborn as the demonic Femto, goes on to commit the unthinkable as he sexually assaults Casca and forces Guts to watch. His attempts to save her prove futile, and he loses an arm and an eye in the process. He is eventually rescued by the Skull Knight, but has to leave a mentally broken Casca for his quest of vengeance as he begins to seek destruction of the God Hand and Griffith, thus laying down the foundation for his gruesome and violent story. The story goes on to portray other horrific elements, such as Casca prematurely giving birth to her malformed son with Guts, known as the Demon Child, who had been corrupted as a result of Femto's violation. His brand of sacrifice causes him to relentlessly be pursued by demons. There's way too much horrific sexual assault in the story, alongside violence, with Guts constantly battling his inner rage in addition to the apostles he kills, and so on and so forth. With his enemy wielding godlike power, Guts is now left with no choice but to sacrifice his humanity for power that will allow him to defeat Griffith once and for all. Unfortunately, the series remains unfinished due to the untimely death of the mangaka in 2021. While he handed the outline of the ending as well as the reins of the manga to his close friend, unfortunately, Berserk will never get the ending that it deserved. Wicked City. Wicked City is a 1987 film revolving around 80s Tokyo, but with a twist. In this version of Tokyo, the human world coexists alongside the demon world, albeit in 2 different dimensions. For the longest time, the 2 worlds have signed peace treaties to maintain harmony, with each treaty being able to ensure 500 years of peace. During the events of the film, the treaty re-signing is due and must be done by a 200-year-old diplomat known as Giuseppe Mayert. However, a group known as the Radicals from the demon world are hell-bent against the renewal of the peace treaty, as they consider humans to be inferior and, as a result, do not wish to maintain peaceful relationships with them. The protagonist, Taki, is a salaryman who's secretly part of an organization known as the Black Guard, responsible for fighting demons. He gets assigned to protecting Mayart until the treaty is renewed, alongside a demon woman named Makie from the other world, who too is part of the Black Guard, and as a result is considered a traitor by the Radicals. Throughout the story, the duo continue to be attacked and Makie is sexually assaulted over and over again, in a very graphic manner as well, by the radicals for being a traitor to their kind. In a twist of events, it's revealed that it was Mayart who was assigned to protect them instead of the other way around, as they were the result of generations of attempts to make biological reproduction possible between a human and a demon, creating mixed offspring who would bridge the gap between both worlds. Being constantly thrown into perilous situations, and with Taki having to protect and save Makie often, the two end up falling in love with each other and consummate. This leads to Makie conceiving a child and eventually being able to defeat the boss radical named Shadow when Taki and Mayart are struggling. Having a half-human, half-demon offspring within her equips her with new abilities. In the end, the new unusual couple re-sign the treaty, and Taki continues to serve in the Blackguard to protect his now family until the birth of his child. The film is extremely graphic and borderline hentai, with scenes reminiscent of tentacle porn. In fact, many of the sexual scenes are not consensual at all. Physical violence, although present, isn't too jarring. The presence of demons opens the gates for body horror, with the presence of a woman who can turn into a half-spider being, she-demons being able to turn into the female sex organ, and other demons having the ability to shoot out visceral projections from their body. There's rampant nudity, and the sexual scenes are often quite violent, particularly the one where several radicals assault Makie being the most terrifying of all. Shojo Sububaki. This 1992 film is so grotesque and controversial that it's been banned almost across the world. Written by Suhiro Maru, this story falls under the horror fiction and erotic literature umbrella and revolves around a young girl named Midori from the Showa period who goes from being a seller of camellia flowers to part of an abusive freak show circus. The story begins in the year 1938, where a poverty-stricken Midori lives with her bedridden mother after being abandoned by her father. While selling flowers, a man offers her to visit him if and when she's in trouble. That very night, she goes home to find her mother not only dead, but being consumed by rats. You think the film would simply imply or state this, but no, you actually see her mom's corpse being subjected to that in animation. Orphaned with nowhere to go, Midori seeks out the man and is led to the Red Cat Circus. The circus is not just any circus, but a freak show with sexual abusers, disfigured people, and members with weird fetishes such as licking eyeballs. One has his body folded like a pretzel, one is a mummy-like armless man who crawls on the ground like a snail, and one is a voluptuous, promiscuous woman who sleeps with all these men in public while often remaining topless. As part of the circus, the prepubescent Midori is constantly assaulted by the circus members and left sore and bleeding. She's subjected to the sights of the snake-charming woman engaging in grotesque intercourse with the others and the man who invited her, Mr. Arashi, licking eyeballs. At some point, she ends up finding her happiness in feeding street puppies, but one of the members kills the puppies on screen and then they are then cooked and fed to the circus members. Midori tries to escape, but her attempts are foiled and she's assaulted by the mummified man again. But with the circus losing money, Mr. Arashi hires Masamitsu, a magician with dwarfism known for Western magic. His magic isn't just tricks, but actual miraculous acts. After becoming acquainted with the group, he takes a quick liking to Midori, and she becomes his assistant as well as his lover. Throughout everything, she's a young teen girl while he's a full-ass grown man, by the way. With Midori's rising popularity, she gets the offer to become an actress, but Masamitsu grows controlling. Following a fight with her, his powers spiral out of control mid-show and grotesquely deforms the audience. The circus is subsequently shut down and Arashi runs away with the money. Eventually, they try to mend their relationship and leave the troupe, but for some weird reason, Midori is now friendly with the other troupe members despite having been assaulted by them as a kid. Masamitsu gets stabbed by a thief on the streets, and Midori, now alone once again, cries desperately after hallucinating the people in her life and subsequently attacking them. This film is easily the most graphic on the list. Midori's life is absolutely garbage from beginning to end, made worse by a weird sense of Stockholm Syndrome where she becomes friendly with her abusers. There's strange imagery of Midori being confined in a vase-like structure by Masamitsu, the wrapping and unraveling of snakes to show assault, Midori being forced to bathe the naked man folded like a pretzel while being a kid, and the intersex member Kanabun peeing in front of her. 15 minutes into the film is enough for one to understand why it's been banned worldwide. Demon City Shinjuku. Demon City Shinjuku is a Japanese horror film released in 1988. It's one of the pioneers, if not the father, of Japan's Senkei urban fantasy genre. Directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, The film represents a hellish Shinjuku, with its horrific transformation being the result of an incident that has taken place a decade prior to the main events of the story. The prologue incident is one of a battle taking place between former friends, namely Rebira and Genichiro Izayoi. To win this battle, Rebira allows himself to be possessed by demons, gaining demonic power in the process. Both fighters were students of Eguni Rai. Rebi's fall to demonic powers allows him to win, and his newly acquired demonic power triggers the demonic quake. This massive earthquake devastates Shinjuku, and with Rebira's intentions of summoning demons to conquer the world, Shinjuku becomes a den for evil monsters and demons. A decade passes by. We see the world president getting attacked by Rebira, who is using cursed plants. The dark magic sends the president into a coma. Meanwhile, Rebira is unaware of his former friend and foe, Genichiro, having had a son who not only had his father's powers but was also stronger. He witnesses the attack on the president on the news, after which Aguni Rai visits him and tells him about Genichiro and Rebira having been his students, and the latter craving demonic power. Aguni Rai then contacts the section chief of Japan's Information Bureau to find Kiyoya Izayoi, as he was the only one who could stop Rebira. Kiyoya is tested using a cyborg commando, and he finds out that he has only 3 days to defeat Rebira, as the president has been subjected to a life-threatening curse and will be used as ritual sacrifice for bringing the demon realm to Earth. In fact, that's what Rebira had attempted 10 years prior, but failure to do so had caused the demon quake. Kiyoya is also pleaded to by an emotional Sayaka Rama, the president's daughter, and tasked with defeating Rebira. He initially brushes her off, but when she accidentally finds herself under a horde of demons in Shinjuku, he comes to her rescue. In the process, such as the spider demon who eats up an old woman trying to help Kiyoya and then proceeds to try and eat Sayaka. A bloody fight ensues between the demon and Kiyoya, and the former is slain. It's revealed that the spider demon was one of Rebira's 3 powerful guards. Enraged at Kiyoya's act, Rebira sends an illusory demon to attack him. This demon almost manages to kill Kiyoya, but ultimately fails. Following this, Kiyoya and Sayaka recover in the home of a man named Mephisto, who tells them about what's going on in Shinjuku. He comes across other foes, such as the Lady Demon, and is also caught in one of the Dark Lord's traps until he's freed by Sayaka. The climax of the film kicks off with Kiyoya preparing to fight Rebira at Shinjuku Station, while Sayaka is about to be used as a sacrifice to allow the demons to enter the world of humans. With their ensuing fight putting Kiyoya at a disadvantage, he ultimately finds his father's sword, Ashura, and gains Genichiro's strength. The demons begin to enter the human world, but Mephisto frees Sayaka before she can be killed, and Kiyoya slays Rebira, forcing the demons back into their own realm. Of course, the president is freed as well. With all being said and done, the story ends with Mephisto reminding Kiyoya that he might be required sometime again in the future. Being a story revolving around a demon city, it's easy to understand how this film gets classified under horror, but like Wicked City, Demon City Shinjuku dives into the similar horrific tropes such as good amounts of violence, terrifying imagery such as the park full of bones, and instances of forced suicide, as well as, of course, gore and body horror. But of course, if you love horror, there's a high chance you love the sight of severed limbs and ruined corpses, in your media at least, right? Mermaid Saga. Known as the Ningyo series in Japanese, Rumiko Takahashi's Mermaid Saga is a 3-volume manga, with the first 2 volumes, namely Mermaid Forest and Mermaid Scar, being released as an anime original video animation, or OVA, in the years 1991 and 1993 respectively. Among the two, Mermaid Scar, released under Viz Media's anime line Viz Video, was successful enough to be a contributing factor in Viz becoming one of America's leading anime producers. The story introduces us to a strange Japanese legend, one where consumption of mermaid flesh may be able to grant one immortality. However, there is a much higher chance of the consumer simply dying from eating mermaid meat or transforming into a creature known as a lost soul or a deformed one. But of course, many have taken a gamble for the sake of immortality, only to end up dead or as a damned creature. But the protagonist Yuta was one such person who had gained immortality. In the events of the saga, he's revealed to have been alive for 500 years. Being alive for so long might sound like he had the greater end of the bargain, but that's quite far from the case for Yuta, who has grown tired of his immortality. As such, he travels across Japan looking for a mermaid who can turn him back into a mortal human being. He's also on the search for similar people whose lives have been ruined by gaining immortality from consuming mermaid flesh. At some point, he meets a 15-year-old girl named Mana who had been force-fed mermaid flesh and, as a result, became immortal. This was done by a group of aging mermaids who had lived for centuries by consuming human flesh and wished to regain their youth by consuming Mana's rejuvenated immortal flesh. As she was about to be sacrificed for the sake of the mermaid's facelift, Yuta rescues her and she joins him in his journey of regaining his mortality. Throughout their travels, they come across people affected by eating mermaid flesh, with each of them having tragic stories of their own. At some point, they meet a young, seemingly 8-year-old boy named Masato. They are shocked when they see his mother assault him using a pair of scissors, but there's more to it than what meets the eye, as Masato is a cruel and manipulative 800-year-old man whose sense of morality has been distorted by his long immortal life. The mother character is barely human at this point, as the effects of consuming mermaid flesh have made her something of a puppet. In fact, he experiences a combination of having his emotions stunted at his physical age while experiencing the perils of leading life as an immortal being with no end in sight. The mother figure we see, Misa, is just one of the many women who have cared for Masato over the centuries, as being stuck at 8 means he needs a parent-like figure always. However, these people always age and even defy him, provoking Masato to kill them. This has resulted in him being obsessed with finding another immortal woman who can stay by his side forever, causing him to believe that Mana is the perfect person to fill that role. He kidnaps her to make her his eternal companion, and using threats and emotional manipulation, tries to make her believe that Masato and Mana are the only ones who can understand each other due to their shared immortality. But with Mana being gone, Yuta desperately searches for her. It's eventually revealed that Masato had a companion and a real friend, a girl named Yuki who became a lost soul after consuming mermaid flesh. Masato tried to take care of her but had to kill her as she had become a monster. Due to the bond they shared, taking Yuki's life deeply scarred Masato, making him the twisted person he is today and becoming fuel for his desperate desire for finding an eternal connection. Ultimately, Yuta rescues Mana. Masato does not get his happy ending as he ponders over his caretakers not wanting to stay with him while he's on the verge of death. The struggles also cause Yuta and Mana to grow closer as they share the burden of immortality together and witness the worst of its effects within Masato. As it stands, humans desire companionship and, as such, aren't cut out for being immortal. While the Mermaid Saga is a story that drives deep into themes such as loneliness and the human desire for connection, it's a horror on the surface due to its dependency on body horror and fantastical elements that cause death and grotesque transformations. The OVAs are also set within a characteristically horror and eerie backdrop, and with Masato's character, they even dive into the territory of psychological horror. Pet Shop of Horrors. This one is a josei manga and anime by Matsuri Akino, which got a 4-episode anime adaptation in 1999 as it adapted a few of the stories from its 10-volume manga. The story is set in Chinatown, Los Angeles, where an eccentric proprietor named Count D runs a mysterious shop that is the titular Pet Shop of Horrors. This shop attracts several patrons interested in getting special pets with its selection of rare pets with humanoid appearances. For a patron to purchase one of Count D's special pets, one has to sign a contract with 3 major points. Each animal has a separate contract and buyers cannot share the details with others. If they break the rules of the contract, the buyer is sure to become subject to disturbing consequences and the pet shop will not claim any liability as a result. The first episode, named Daughter, adapts the first case in the manga where a wealthy couple has lost their daughter. They go to Count D's pet shop and are offered a rabbit that, under specific conditions, will appear to them as their daughter. However, they must follow 3 rules strictly. They cannot show the pet to anyone, it has to be kept on a strict vegetarian diet, and it cannot be photographed. However, the contract is breached as the mother is so moved and beyond happy to be sharing a life with what seems to be her daughter once again that she starts to photograph her, and showing her off even makes her break the vegetarian diet. This causes the illusion to shatter and the daughter proves to be a terrifying rabbit-like creature. The body even bursts and plenty of human babies come out of it, which are soon revealed to be deadly rabbits that horrifically kill the father while the mother has to be institutionalized. All in all, the contract is similar to making a deal with the devil where any breach of trust results in absolute disaster. The other 3 episodes are equally horrifying, with Pet Shop of Horrors being drenched in gothic overtones with plenty of body horror. It would be fantastic for the show to have a modern adaptation, albeit in the spookier 90s style, but with more episodes, as the current mainstream anime scene is severely lacking in this department. Serial Experiments Lane. This 1998 entry is a very complicated story to explain and can fall under the same umbrella of confusing 90s cyberpunk alongside Neon Genesis, a series we've explored in great detail on our channel. In Chiaki J. Konaka's Serial Experiments Lane, the lines between the real world and the digital world, known as the Wired in the story, begin to get blurred, with the protagonist Lane's descent into the digital territory. Lane is introduced as an introverted young teen who suddenly begins to receive emails from her classmate who has died from suicide, which should not be possible. In reality, her classmate Chisa is not dead, but instead has simply abandoned her flesh to become part of the internet-like digital landscape of the Wired. She convinces Lane to join her and even claims that she has found God. As such, Lane gets into computers, much to her tech nerd father's delight, but with each passing day, she gets more and more invested in this new world, ditching her teddy bear onesie and childish plush toys for monitors, CPUs, and wires, to the point that we start seeing Lane as a small figure in a room teeming with wires. While in The Wired, Lane meets another Lane, someone who is the exact opposite of her with an extroverted party-going persona and is known as the Wild Lane. This new, popular Lane has a life that the one in the physical world probably wants but cannot have due to her introversion. The Wired is capable of facilitating unconscious communication between humans using machines by taking out the need for physical interference. Simply put, it means people can communicate with each other within the Wired without needing a physical interface such as a phone. They essentially upload their consciousness while their physical body is left outside their computers. Within this virtual world, you can become whoever you want to be, similar to how many outcast people in the physical world often have wildly different personalities on the internet. But Lane isn't just a regular person. She's revealed to be an artifact who can break down the wall between the real and the digital world. The god of the digital world, Masami Iri, or Deus, doesn't want that. Similar to Chisa, he has uploaded his consciousness in the Wired and allowed his body in the real world to pass away. He wishes for the physical world to merge with the digital, and for this reason, needs Lane's body outside her computer to be dead. So, hackers who believe in Deus camp outside Lane's house to monitor her and eventually end up physically attacking her to kill her body while her consciousness is uploaded. But the attack fails. Subsequent interactions between Deus and Lane help her learn that she might just be a hologram projection from the Wired into the physical world, much like a phone app. Her sense of self and reality get confused as she fails to understand which world is real and who or what she is. Ultimately, she realizes her power within the Wired and becomes the ultimate god within it, as she is highly respected there for being the coveted artifact that the god is desperate to get his hands on. Killing Deus helps her achieve her goal and alters everything connected to herself, twisting others' memories of her and traveling between the two worlds. All in all, the show is a sci-fi horror and is something that definitely requires more than one watch for you to properly understand what's going on. Despite the complications within the plot, the story ends on a note where things are resolved and Lane is back to being a cute teen girl who loves her plushies and bear onesie. Vampire Hunter D. Vampire Hunter D is a fantasy horror film from 1985, adapted from Hideyuki Kikuchi's novel. It's set in the extreme future of 12,090 AD, where the modern world is a result of the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust which took place in the year 1999. This nuclear war was orchestrated by the nobility, or the vampires, more specifically by their sacred ancestor, who has been implied to be Count Dracula. As the vampires ruled, their technology, strength, and new world order, alongside the sequestering of resources that could help humanity rebuild their civilization, allowed them to reach the peak of their existence. But everything must come to an end. As a result, even with their superior science and magic, the era of the vampires was about to hit the dust, their populations being reduced dramatically, and human civilization being on the verge of its takeover. This brings forth the titular Vampire Hunter D, a half-human, half-vampire hybrid known as a Dampier, who is far more powerful than the other nobles despite being lower in the hierarchy due to his mixed lineage, and was used to kill vampires due to his hatred for them and his pain as an outcast as someone who didn't fit into either of the two worlds. With time, we learn that he was directly created by the sacred ancestor who infused his DNA with that of humans to create the ideal being, D, a vampire with enormous abilities who lack the stereotypical vampiric weaknesses such as an aversion to sunlight and a need for human blood. In the film, D gets hired by a woman, Doris, who's being targeted by a vampire lord named Count Magnus Lee for marriage, and he must protect her. This leads to him fighting against the Count's daughter as well as his servant, and in one instance, infiltrating the castle to bring back a kidnapped Doris. At one point, the servant, Ray, manages to use the time-bewitching essence to weaken D, and he is impaled with a wooden stake. Left to be consumed and killed by a mutant creature, D's unusual symbiotic left hand, which has a sentience of its own and was possibly a creation of the sacred ancestor, sucks in everything around D to use its life and revive its host, that is, D. In the climax, D fights Count Magnus Lee in his castle, and due to him being much more powerful than your average vampire, as the direct descendant of the sacred ancestor, he manages to win despite the Count's many dirty tricks. The film revels in grotesque scenes and deaths, with heads being smashed, bodies turning into foundations, eyes being separated from skulls, and of course, violent battles. All of that considered, what truly makes Vampire D an iconic entry on this list of horrors is the presence of vampires, who are only one of the most popular horror-centric beings within the genre. Akira! And finally, we end this list with a bang with the 1988 cyberpunk action Katsuhiro Otomo's legendary Akira. A pioneer in the frontier of sci-fi horror, this film is one that many know about and is one of the earliest Japanese animations to make waves in the West. That the Akira bike slide has been used over and over again across many films, series, animations, and the like. The story is set in a dystopian, futuristic 2019, with 2019 being 31 years into the future back in its time of release, and not 6 years into the past like it is now. It introduces us to Neo-Tokyo, which has been plagued by corruption, anarchy, gang violence, and terrorism. We're introduced to Shotaro Kaneda, who leads a vigilante biker gang known as the Capsules and clashes against the opposing gang, the Clowns, during a violent rally. His best friend, Tetsuo Shima, crashes into an Esper, that is, someone with extrasensory perception, who was escaping from a government facility. Tetsuo gets hospitalized and is revealed to have become an Esper himself, who possesses abilities similar to that of Akira's, the Esper whose abilities caused Tokyo to be destroyed in 1988, triggering the ensuing Third World War. Takashi is recaptured by the Japan Self-Defense Forces, and the Capsules are captured. Due to Kaneda meeting the activist K, they manage to trick the authorities into escaping. Meanwhile, Neo-Tokyo is set to be destroyed as per the warnings of Esper Kiyoko to Colonel Shikishima, which causes the latter to consider killing Tetsuo for the sake of Tokyo's safety. However, Tetsuo escapes from the hospital and tries to flee Neo-Tokyo with his girlfriend Kaori by stealing Kaneda's motorcycle. They are subsequently attacked by the Clowns and rescued by the Capsules, but Tetsuo becomes subject to hallucinations and intense headaches, causing him to become hospitalized again. Kaneda becomes part of the activists' plan of rescuing the Espers, including Tetsuo, while others in the hospital try to kill Tetsuo using hallucinations. The attempt fails as Tetsuo runs amok, killing those who get in his way. Ultimately, Esper Kiyoko tells Tetsuo about Akira being located in cryogenesis beneath the construction site of the Olympic Stadium and claims that he can help him. So, Tetsuo betrays everyone, including Kaneda, and flees to find Akira. Meanwhile, Shikishima stages a coup against the government of Neo-Tokyo and redirects its military to eliminate Tetsuo. At the same time, Tetsuo gets into an altercation at the former hangout of his biker gang and kills a gangmate. News reaches Kaneda, who vows to avenge the death, while Tetsuo rampages through the city while being mistaken for Akira due to having the same abilities. Ultimately, he finds Akira, but is engaged in a battle by Kei. Tetsuo defeats her and ends up finding nothing but Akira's remains sealed in jars for research. Kaneda and Shikishima both attack Tetsuo, who now has a robotic arm due to Shikishima's attack destroying his human one and is losing control over his powers while being in great pain. Kaori tries to help him and Shikishima joins in, but Kaneda continues to fight Tetsuo. The missing arm, however, weakens Tetsuo, and he starts mutating into a mass of flesh, which engulfs Kaneda and unfortunately kills Kaori. To stop the mess, the Espers revive Akira, who then creates Singularity. It draws Tetsuo and Kaneda into a separate dimension, while the Singularity destroys Neo-Tokyo the same way it had over 30 years ago. In that dimension, however, Kaneda experiences the childhood of Tetsuo and the Espers, witnessing Esper's training and experiencing his now damaged friendship with Tetsuo. He is returned to Neo-Tokyo by the Espers, while Akira is tasked with taking Tetsuo to safety. The Singularity disappears after consuming the majority of Neo-Tokyo, and water floods into the craters. Kaneda mourns the loss of Tetsuo, while the latter is seen again in an unspecified reality plane where he triggers the creation of another universe and transcends human existence. Akira is considered to be a masterpiece in its field and proves to be a horrifying depiction of sci-fi gone rogue amidst a dystopian, violent world that's more than just body horror, but one of the early depictions of telekinetic powers going ham and posing a threat to society at large. Its premise, emotional intensity, character dynamics, and atmosphere are now responsible for Akira's enjoying the reputation of being one of the most influential pieces of animated media. Marvelous verdict! The relationship between horror and animation is one of maximizing creative abilities and expression, with writers, creators, directors, and animators causing an explosion of how far they can take their concepts, touching heights that cannot be accessed by live-action techniques, even with the help of modern technology. And with that thought, today's video comes to an end. Which of these 10 anime is your favorite, or did we completely miss your favorite? If so, we'd love to hear about it in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe while you're down there, it really helps us out a lot. That's all we got for you this time, but thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.